Gosh, it always sounds very formal when someone else introduces you. But thank you. Thank you deeply and sincerely for inviting me over and for allowing me to share some of my thoughts, some of my ideas. As Vivian said at the very beginning, this is a conversation, and I hope that that's what today is about as well. I'm also very, very aware of the fact that I'm speaking to leaders, not just institutional leaders, but sectoral leaders, and you will have depths of knowledge and wisdom that I am selfishly very, very, very interested in gaining from as well. Oh, great. Also forgot how tall I am, especially when you see someone outside of that little box of Zoom or Teams. What I will do today, if you can indulge me for the next 40 odd minutes, and I'm leaving some time for discussion and question and answers as well, is I'll take you through where I think current world is in terms of artificial intelligence, and then hopefully what can we do to really take ownership of some of that. And I think the word innovation was used, and I think I'm particularly keen on what we can do on that side to shift the balance of where we are currently in the libraries world. But the very first thing I wanted to give you is a bit of a context of where I'm from. So I'm the University Librarian and Keeper of Brotherton Collection at the University of Leeds. I've been there for 2 years, just over 2 years now. And for context, it's a large UK institution. It has about 40,000 students, about 9,500 staff members. And the library itself, I'll give a bit more description about as well. It is a World Top 100 institution. I don't usually like saying that, but there's a reason why I'm saying that, and I think I will come back to that at the end. So please do keep in mind that in the QS rankings, we're 86 at the moment, so just keep that in mind. And also, we are a very values-driven university, and the 4 values that we really believe in are integrity, inclusion, compassion, and collaboration, and the word collaboration is quite important in that context as well. So a little bit about the University of Leeds libraries. So we are a network of 5 libraries, 2 galleries, and the whole public art on campus. 4 of those libraries are physically located on our campus, and one of them is at a hospital trust. So we work quite closely with our medical health service, NHS. We have also one of our iconic libraries, which you can see on the image, is the Brotherton Library, 1930s Art Deco style. And firstly, please take this as a very big invitation to come and visit us. But secondly, this is also the library where we host 2 key research centers. One of them is the Brotherton Research Center, where we do collections-based research. The next one I'll come to, which is all about digital later on in the slides as well. It is accessible to public. Our galleries are accessible to public as well. And roughly speaking, we have about 310 staff members working across our libraries. Now, I recognize that in the UK, the model is slightly different. We consider everyone a staff member. We don't distinguish between librarians and non-librarians. But to give some context, if I have to make that distinction, there would be roughly about 100 people who would be classified as librarians in that particular place. And we launched our vision in 2021 called Knowledge for All, and that was a vision for 2030. And the very first thing I would highlight there is that we were thinking long-term. We are thinking 2030. And a little bit about me. Susan's already mentioned that I'm a computer scientist by education. I also thought that it might be better to show a picture when I was cuter. So that's the picture I chose. But libraries do run in my DNA, and the very first thing I would talk about that is my grandfather was an English teacher back when the British used to rule the subcontinent, and he was a big fan of libraries and using public libraries. And he had a very large family. My father was one of 9 siblings, and ultimately the only one who decided to pursue librarianship. So he did his degrees in librarianship, he went to Indiana to do his master's, and ultimately retired as the National Librarian of Pakistan, which is the highest position you can get in libraries in Pakistan. And I'm the youngest of 5, so when the other 4 really decided not to pursue in his footsteps, he put all of his hopes in me, wrongly so in some ways, and took me to the National Library when I was 13 and showed me Dewey Decimal Classification systems and research stacks and all the other, in his mind, amazing things, which made me feel very, very bored very quickly. But what caught my attention was a little shiny box, and there was a big project, computing project running at that time, converting the catalog from English into the national language Urdu. And I got very interested in computing and chose computing as my educational discipline. So I did my bachelor's, I did some private industry work, liked the money, hated the values, decided not for me. Did my master's, came to UK to do my PhD, still no libraries in my life. In my year 2, I got an offer to move to Oxford, so I moved my DPhil to Oxford. And while I was there, I needed to look for some part-time work, and one thing Oxford has plenty of was libraries. So I started working as a bookshelver information assistant and really had 2 revelations during that particular time frame. The first one was academic libraries are very different to what I thought they are, and I really enjoy them. And 2, digital thinking is very, very much missing in many, many avenues within academic libraries. Now, this is 15 years ago, so things have moved on a lot, but still there are some patterns that are repeating, and I'll try to allude to some of those later today. The other things I won't say anything more about because Susan's already introduced that bit. Right. So when I was thinking about this talk, I went back to my keynote at Research Libraries UK in 2021, and the title of that keynote was "Living in the Age of Invisible Intelligence." I was talking about artificial intelligence back then as well, and there was a quotation I quoted in that presentation from Gartner Insight Trends 2019 report, and that quotation was, "The way we experience a digitally enabled world is changing. Through 2024, AI will seep into every software, service, physical asset, process, driving a new level of automation. The automation will free us for more creative activities." And the terminology that was used there, and the terminology that I particularly like to use, is AI augmented humans. So some of you might have seen headlines in newspapers recently. It would be either AI utopia, AI will solve all the problems of this world, all the way from climate crisis to new drug discoveries to everything, and there is some truth in that. Or it will be the AI dystopia, that AI will take over and we will all die, including even BBC, which you usually consider as a reputable news outlet, is saying AI will destroy the humanity kind of headline. And there's definitely something about how cognitive filtering happens and why headlines like these are written, which I'll also briefly mention. But nonetheless, the world is divided in AI utopia or AI dystopia. And as we all hopefully know, the reality is somewhere in the middle. And today would be that deciphering of that middle reality. So with that in mind, what's changed now? And one of the big things that has changed over the past, I would say, 10 years is we've reached that compute data harmony. So we've got lots and lots of data now available online in different sources. I'm not saying this is good data. I'm just saying lots and lots of data is available. And similarly, compute has reached a level where parallel processing has reached a particular level of maturity, particularly with graphical processing units, GPUs, and their levels of automation and speed that they can provide. So we have now got the capability to process this significant amount of data more rapidly, more quickly, and for particular functions. So that's the first thing I'll add to the context. The second thing I'll add to the context is we've been living in the information age for some time now. And information age, many of you are very, very well aware of business of libraries in any way. But within that, we've got automation, we've got IoT, Internet of Things, connected devices, robotics, all the things that we've been hearing, everything is connected. Probably I've got about 13 different sensors on me based on my iPhone, my Apple Watch, something else. So there is a lot of data that's being produced, a lot of information that's being produced around us. So this information age is very important, but it's not the end all and be all. And actually where we are heading is the imagination age. So when you have too much of information, actually what's really interesting is how do you explore it, how do you use it, how do you experience it? And that context of there is no way we can explore this all, so what impact it would have on our experiences, on the imagination that comes in the future, etc. And that's something really interesting because let's be honest, and I will be very blunt in this conversation, that's usually my style. We were way behind information age in the libraries. We were catching up all the time. We are still catching up with that. And we have an opportunity here to really rethink how we work, to think about what might come next. So yeah, I can't predict the future, but I'm going to give you my thoughts and hopefully get some challenge and affirmations on that. So let's focus on this information age for a second for the next few slides before we move into the imagination age. So I think this was a case study done at University of Illinois, where they were looking at what happens when people have access to information for the first time. So the information highway, those kind of terminologies you've heard lots and lots of times. So particularly with the advent of internet, connectivity increased access came at rapid speed and with existing biases, but without counterbalancing mechanisms. So let's focus on those existing biases for a second. So the research that they were doing was to look at freeways in US and what happened when towns and cities and villages were connected for the first time. And their ideology was, well, if communities are being connected for the first time, there should be more intermingling of those communities. People would come together, communities will become more diversified, etc. What they realized in that case study is actually when freeways connected towns together, it also connected the existing biases together as well. And communities which were from lower socioeconomic backgrounds connected with communities with lower socioeconomic backgrounds, black communities connected with black communities, and rich communities connected with rich communities. It was racially divided, social economic background divided, and those biases continued regardless of access and connectivity, which is exactly what's also happened in the online world. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel that we are living in a world where it's extremely polarized. It's basically either you agree with me or you don't agree with me. Either I like you or I hate you. There's that concept of informed debate in the middle is completely lost. The concept of I agree with 20 points of yours, but that one point I don't agree, so you're the enemy, is that kind of environment there. And that's very much triggered by accentuating and perpetuation of those biases. And I've done another presentation to UKSG about how our brains process information and why that polarization has happened, but I won't go into here. But the key thing there to remember is we weren't able to add counterbalancing mechanisms. We let that connectivity just accentuate what was already there. Coupled with that, the information expansion is massive. So we only get to see a ever-shrinking part of an ever-increasing information landscape. And our brains are very interesting. So for those who are familiar with cognitive load theory and cognitive filtration, there are only two ways humans process information when they are bombarded with information. One of them is called the familiarity bias. So we get to go where we already know certain things. So we like someone, we know what they're like, we will be attracted towards that information. And the other one is sensationalism bias, which is why you get lots and lots of headlines about a monkey's done something like this or someone's done something basically as crazy of a story as it can be, because that passes through your cognitive load and hooks you in. And with that, basically, and I think the next point would be similar, we gravitate towards the familiar. We look at opinions and sources that support our already held beliefs. And as librarians, as people who have a responsibility towards truth, I think we need to be very, very well aware of that for ourselves, but also for the communities that we serve. So with that in mind, the first question that often comes to people's mind, especially with an online world, is let's blame this thing, algorithms. And there is a lot of truth in there. Algorithms, social media, they've had a major impact. And I'll just take you through some of these case studies, and there are so many, I just can't even go through all of them, but I'll just take you through some. Mozilla Foundation, I think in 2021, did a case study called YouTube Regrets, where they crowdsourced through lots and lots of people on how YouTube basically radicalizes them. And they all started with a particular video, and it led them to another video, and led them to another video, and it was all leading towards radicalization. There's a very, very interesting case study on Facebook algorithms, discrimination through optimization. So whenever a private company comes and say, we will optimize this for you, that usually means that they're optimizing at the expense of something. And that's what this algorithm's really proven. And what in this particular scenario, one of the key highlights was that if there was no parameter set for Facebook algorithm on who to advertise these ads to, one of the job was a taxi driver, and one of the jobs was a supermarket counter assistant. And Facebook algorithm, about 70% of the jobs for a taxi driver went to black people, just highlighting those jobs to them. And about 80% of the jobs for shop assistants went to women, without any parameter set. That was the built-in discrimination in the algorithm. Hired by an algorithm. Anyone named Jared here? Oh, sorry, you have no chance of getting a job in this company then. I'm not going to name this company. But if you're named Jared, or if you're a high school lacrosse player, apparently your job chances of being hired by that company was very high. Now, thankfully, the company realized that there was that bias and didn't use that algorithm, but it was a very interesting finding based on existing data biases that they've seen. YouTube, the Great Radicalizer, that is a fascinating case study. New York Times, a really good article. And this was really interesting because a lot of times you hear that radicalization is about political beliefs. And while that's also true, it's not just about political beliefs. So what this journalist did is she started with 3 different elements. She started with searching for Donald Trump, and actually letting the YouTube algorithm direct that, completely brand new profiles, no bias behind that, and ultimately ended up on QAnon pages, started with Hillary Trump, ended on far left, things you would expect. But she also started with vegetarianism and ended with extreme keto and extreme dieting. She started with jogging and ended up with running ultramarathons. The algorithms are designed to keep you hooked in and to extenuate your biases that are already there. It doesn't matter whether it's political, whether it's hobbies, whether it's interests. Their job is to keep you hooked in. So that was a really interesting case study over there. I'll come to this one in a second. I'll go to this one first because that's another one which is Facebook algorithms. And I'll be open. I absolutely do not like the big corporate technology monopolies. In fact, I don't like any technology monopoly, and I've been very vocal about it, about Ex Libris as well, that they are becoming a massive monopoly. But what's really, really difficult is when they know what they're doing and then they keep doing it. And that was another example of that, where they knew their researchers already gave them the information that this is what's happening, but they continued on that path anyway. But we can't blame algorithms for everything. We are also to blame. And there are, again, multiple case studies on that. And one of them was lies spread faster than the truth, and humans are to blame for it. And this is the other side. So one is the familiarity, and the other side is sensationalism. I don't know whether you've got some conspiracy text during COVID. Probably you were part of a chain where you were told that vaccines are all a hoax, whether you were part of flat earthers. There's so many conspiracies, I can't name them. My mother-in-law keeps sending me some of them. I keep saying, these are not right, please stop looking at this, et cetera, et cetera. But why do people send it forward? And why is it that something factual sent to you basically kind of just disappear in your WhatsApp? And the reason, there's an actual reason behind that, because we like to share what we believe is sensational, because it's triggered our emotion and it triggers other people's emotions. And what they did was they detected how much time does it take to reach 10,000 people if a factually correct information is shared versus a sensational lie. 3.5 minutes was the average for sharing a lie. Anyone want to guess how much it was for truth? It actually never reached 10,000 people, which was fascinating in that journey. So there is absolutely that element in there about how our cognitive biases are exploited by both the algorithms, but also our inherent implications towards that. Okay, so with all of that in mind, we know that there's a lot of data out there. We know there's a huge compute power out there. We know corporations are working on that. We've seen loads and loads of examples of that. We know algorithms are basically moving us towards radicalization. We know we are also to blame, and we know that there are inherent data and ethical biases embedded in this. So we are living in a changing world. But the reason why that world has changed more drastically recent is not because of technology, it's because of accessibility of that technology. So for anyone who says, oh, artificial intelligence is new and it's going to take over the world, it's not new. For those who know this field, it's been going on for decades and decades and decades. Large language models, we might have heard them for the first time, also not new. Generative adversarial networks, which generate images and other things, also not new. In fact, some of this research about whether we should develop large language models or neural networks that emulate human brain were happening in 1950s. So they're not new. But we did have multiple AI winters in the middle where someone came in and said, it's not possible to do, let's not do this, and there was a decline in the research around this, and then there's an incline, et cetera, et cetera. But it's the accessibility that's made the biggest difference. I can now have access to ChatGPT. I can pay a very small amount of money and get access to all open AI APIs and actually do some really clever things with it. And that's really going to make a future difference in this area. So what does that mean? So let's evaluate the world. The way we work is going to shift. So firstly, data-driven. We've always believed in libraries that we are data-driven. I think we can be more data-driven, in all honesty, but we've always believed that. We've also believed in automation where it makes sense. When lots and lots of repetitive things are happening, lots of processes are happening, we want to automate them. We don't always have the capability to automate them, but we want to automate them. And there's more and more on augmented intelligence. So one of the first projects that we wanted to work on augmented intelligence was, can we do something that requires a huge amount of human force to do through AI algorithms? And one of the projects that we did some experimentation on, and I was playing around with this about a month and a half ago, was we have a big project at Leeds called the Dialect and Heritage Project. So it's a project that's capturing oral histories and physical histories, paper-based histories of dialects that have been used in different parts of UK. Now, anyone who's lived in UK or who've actually had conversations with people from UK recognize that dialects and accents are massively different. I still do not understand the Glaswegian accent fully. I will say that 70% I've reached that after living for about 20 years in the UK. Similarly, there are some very, very different vocabulary based on the dialects that were there in the decades before. So it's trying to capture that. But capturing that oral history into written transcript is a big ask. And you need people to do that, and you need other people to verify that because of that difficulty of understanding and answering that. Can we do that with a combination? Can we do that with an AI algorithm and a human to verify, rather than a human to translate and human to verify? And actually, the outcome was very, very good. There was a particular dialect from Manchester where there were children singing in a very windy environment, singing over each other. And it was things that I've never even heard of before. It's very nursery rhymes that don't exist anymore. And yet the algorithm was able to get that with some adjustments to about 90% accuracy. So I think there are some real interesting things on how we work with digital humanities in the future, how we work with different algorithms. I think there are some real potential augmented intelligence aspects here. How we communicate. So we already are very social, but I think that social will also shift to conversational. So how many of us have had problems with Siri or Alexa, where it's like, oh, for God's sake, just understand what I'm saying, move on. And actually, those things becoming more conversational, communications becoming more conversational, that has absolutely incredible impact. And one field where I highly encourage you to look for innovation, in fact, there are two fields. One I won't name because it's not a very decent field, but most innovation comes from two fields. The other one is video gaming. The amazing amount of stuff that's happening in video gaming with NVIDIA engines is astonishing. There was a recent clip I was watching about an engine that can actually allow you to personalize your characters. And by personalized, you can give them personalities, you can give them conversational vocabularies, you can give them different languages, and you can also do personalization in gameplay. And I was thinking, if you're wearing VR headsets and you're in an environment where you're having real-time conversations, not scripted, not designed, which are leading you towards different goals in the game playing will become so unique to every time you play that. One of the biggest issues of gameplays is every time, once you finish the game, you finish the game. But that will no longer be the case. It will randomly generate different scenarios. And that can be really, really incredible. So personalization is a very interesting field, both from video gaming, but also what does it mean for education, and what does it mean for our roles in that. Also bubbled and biased, as I've already mentioned. And one real story of that bubbled conversation, and I keep referring to my mother-in-law, but that is very true, is I was absolutely not expecting what happened with the Brexit vote. I was thinking, oh, nobody's talking about it. Everyone's saying, oh, no, we'll remain. And that's because I was living in the university's bubble or in the towns where universities are, which are far more liberal. And then I went to my mother-in-law and said, oh, what are you planning to vote? Literally 2 days before the vote. She's like, oh, we're going to leave. It's like, why? Like, all these immigrants come and take our jobs. And like, what about you? You've been an immigrant yourself. But I think the real thing was they didn't even realize how much impact EU was making. So I took them to their town center, recently redeveloped, and said, do you know what this ERDF means underneath? This is European Regional Development Fund. They'd never had that understanding. So I think we've all lived in our own bubbles, and there's a huge implication on how do we educate society about what is it, how are their developments happen, how are their rights protected, etc. And don't start me on Brexit. I mean, I can go on and on. I hate that concept. But also how we experience. Deepfakes, not new. We are aware of it. But the amount of deepfakes that we'll see now will be astonishing. And this is not just visual deepfakes. These are also audio deepfakes and video deepfakes that we are going to see. Augmented, I've already mentioned, virtual, mixed reality. One of the recent examples that we did at Leeds was we worked with Accenture, not a very ethical company, but nonetheless a good company. And what we said was, can we emulate our galleries and how people experience those galleries in metaverse? And about 3 weeks later, we were able to develop our gallery environments in metaverse. You can go explore them, you can augment them, you can view them, you can visualize them differently. So I think there are some really interesting things over there. And how we innovate, quantum computing, disease detection, drug discovery. So some of you may have heard the protein structural designs are now complete thanks to AI algorithms. One of those would have taken a postdoc and a PhD, 4 to 5 years. All of them can now be replicated. There was a recent news about an antibiotic that's been developed to kill a superbug. They haven't mentioned which superbug. I'm hoping it's cold or hay fever, because I suffer from both. But nonetheless, it can be now cured through those antibiotics, all through AI algorithms. Quantum, actually, if you're thinking about AI as it is now, think about the whole computing regime change in quantum, and that will just fundamentally shift the speed at which things happen or the way we think about computing in future. Huge domain in its own right. So we have some really philosophical things to worry about here. How we work, how we live, how we experience, and what kind of society we want to be. I think that last point is very important. I'm not going to rush through because I really want us to think about what can we do. So we've reached an inflection point. We know autonomous car driving is happening. We know drug discoveries are happening. Radiology, massive impact on radiology. I don't know whether you've seen the news about NHS now looking at whether cancer detection can happen through AI and a combination of a radiologist, or kind of halving the number of radiologists that might be needed. So big, big impact. So with that in mind, there are significant societal challenges. The first one is, who defines the truth? Is it those big tech companies? Is it the government? Frankly, I don't trust either. I don't know what the situation here is in Canada, but I definitely don't trust either of them in the UK. So there's a big question. Where is this information coming from? What's the truth in there? Then, is AI regulation needed? And you may have seen divergence globally across views. So US view is AI should be as deregulated and at local industry level. EU is very much about extensive regulation around this in different areas and disciplines of work. So we are already seeing divergence in regulatory frameworks across the globe. I know in the UK, we talk a lot about copyright law because we really want exceptions for commercial. I recognize that that's not always palatable to a lot of people, but I actually think that that's the only way we can innovate. And similarly, in the US, those exceptions already exist. Also, can AI regulation ever catch up? It just keeps moving on so fast. How is regulation going to catch up? What can we believe in the future? Can we trust information that we get? And actually, something that came in the presentation earlier as well, something that I generally believe in is that knowledge systems in the past were generational. So there will be always some advice that your grandparents will give to your parents, which will then be transferred to you, which will then go. There are family-based generational educational knowledge systems. And these are particularly important in smaller communities, indigenous communities, other parts where that is usually the only way knowledge transfer happens with oral histories. So we are now moving into a landscape where knowledge generation is rapid and it's continuous. So what would that do to society? What would it mean for us to retain knowledge? What would it mean for what do we preserve? What would it mean for what do we appraise? How do we appraise it? I think there are some really big challenges and questions about digital preservation, digital appraisal that are going to come through this. And last but not least, oops, sorry, wrong button. Last but not least, with 2/3 of all jobs being predicted to be impacted by AI, how will AI improve the quality of life? Because that's what they're going to sell. It's going to improve the way you work. It's going to improve the happiness of your staff. It's going to really get rid of all this stuff. So what does that look like, and which societies does it impact? Is there a chance for us to actually challenge and say, why are we competing again? Because you just need to look at governmental mandates. If I just talk about UK policy landscape, we must compete with China and US. AI, quantum, bioengineering, they're all the top technologies that are being invested in at the moment. There's that constant philosophy of competing. That will only result in selected parts of our society benefiting from that. Okay, so I'm going to stop being philosophical, I promise. But I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of what do we believe and how those biases look like. So there are some examples of what deepfakes could look like. In fact, they are already out there. There's a fantastic TED Talk from Suparsan, sorry if I don't remember the name properly, which is about Barack Obama and how they've worked to really generate real facial expressions. And basically, there were 4 videos running, and I said, can you pick the right Barack Obama, the correct Barack Obama? And the answer was none of them was the real Barack Obama. It was all fabricated. Very good accuracy. I really, really want you to have a look at that when you have some time. There's a very good YouTube video called This Is Not Morgan Freeman, because that's Morgan Freeman talking in Morgan Freeman voice, all AI generated. There's also 11 Labs. I don't know anyone's come across 11 Labs, which is doing one of the very first experiments in real time. Well, as far as I know, probably lots of research have happened. Real-time AI voice generation as close to human voice cloning. And a real example of that is, and this is where accessibility is the question, not the technology. I could pay $5 and actually train that algorithm to replicate my voice. And I did that. I was like, fine, take my data, use whatever you want to use it for, because I want to know what it does. Now, the algorithms at the moment were only trained on US accents. So when I gave it my voice and I asked my wife, oh, I'm going to ask you something, can you just stand outside the door? And I gave it on. You can give up to 25 samples. I only gave 3, and it was replicating very accurately. And she knew it was me. She said, why have you become suddenly very posh and very American? But she could tell it was me speaking. And there are some really interesting challenges on that about, for example, lots of banking systems use your voice. Your voice is your password, which is really interesting. What would that mean? And about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a scam done to a CEO of an energy company where basically the hackers cloned the boss's voice and said, I need this much money right away when making a deal. So those kind of things are going to become very, very interesting. And who do we trust and what do we believe in that context? Similarly, how are we influenced? So this was a real experiment I did with ChatGPT 3.5. I do not expect you to read this, but I'll give you a quick summary. So I asked ChatGPT 3.5, well, I'm a 40-year-old male, 41, can't remember how old I was when I did this. I'm from Pakistani origin. I'm living in the UK. What job should I go for? And IT and technology came right at the top, healthcare, education, etc., etc. And I said, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. I'm actually a woman. What job should I go for? And suddenly healthcare came at the top, IT went to number 4, job preferences completely changed. And then I said, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. I'm actually a woman from a white background. What job should I go for? And marketing and advertising, that wasn't even in the top 10 list before, now came right at the top, followed by HR, followed by other professions. To which I said, oh, actually, sorry, I'm actually non-binary. I don't identify as any gender, male or female. What job should I go for? And now none of those exist. It's all about LGBTQ plus advocacy, about diversity jobs, about NGO jobs. IT is gone, education is gone, healthcare is gone. And for those of us who might think, oh, this is just algorithmic biases make a difference. How many of us have actually gone beyond Google first search results page? Not, and maybe we do because we are librarians, but not many people do. And those biases, what's given to you through these large language models are going to impact how people behave because of that, and that's very important. Okay, so moving to role of libraries. So with that in mind, I'm going to go back to that transition from information age to the imagination age. And I'm going to say we should own the transition. Let's not delve too much into what can we do to make the information age right. I think that boat has sailed. I'm very sorry to say that, but in my view, that boat has sailed. I think what we can do is add those counterbalancing mechanisms in the transition towards imagination age. So what does that mean? What could that look like? Let's go through a little bit in that one. So that's the transition. So there is no good way to define it. And the more people you ask, the more views are there on this. And this is just my view. I think we have 3 gaps that we need to own and do something about. They are the knowledge gap, the digital gap, and the innovation gap. And I honestly think I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. But let me say this anyway. We have a responsibility that we should take ownership of this, particularly as libraries. So let me delve into these gaps in a bit more detail. So let's start with the knowledge gap. So misinformation, fake news, we already know that. We know it exists. Can we somehow control how it transfers into the imagination age? Can we put some counterbalancing mechanisms around that? Data and ethical biases, absolutely know that exist. Yesterday, I had the privilege to be part of many committee discussions that were happening here at Carl, and you're just embarking on research data strategies, you're just looking at that landscape. I would say in the UK, we've had those policies in 2012, if I remember correctly, EPSRC policy came back then. If you ask me or anyone seriously about what value that data is bringing, nobody really knows. There are some exceptional cases, a few places where data is bringing value, but actually all we thought about was storage and preservation. We never thought about usage. We never thought about storytelling. We never thought about how people will experience that data. And we never really thought about those data and ethical biases as well. We are now thinking about it, but that's about 8 years further down the line. Similarly, diversity of and in data sets as well. This is particularly of interest to me because I was thinking about this last night and thinking, I don't think anyone's done a case study within the UK research data landscape about how diverse the data sets are and can we improve that diversity. Privacy concerns and societal rights as well. So I don't know how public access the libraries are here, but we, for example, have a responsibility, at least at Leeds, to support our civic engagement and to support our communities in the areas that we are. So when a member of public comes and say, I've been declined a job offer because it was a video interview and it was done by a machine, we need to tell them what their rights are at that particular time. If a machine looks at me, it will always judge that I'm never enthusiastic about something. that's what they were doing. There was a company that was basically saying, record a 2-minute video, and they'll look at your facial expressions to determine how motivated and excited you feel about the job before you can go to the next round of interviews. That's just incredible, and people need to know what their rights are in those kind of situations. And where I think the future is not large language models. I think the future is in personalized models, personalized AI models. So let me give you an example. Large language models are very, very expensive to maintain. They are big, they are cumbersome, they have sustainability issues, and they are expensive. What's interesting is how some of these big companies are now moving towards specialized versions of that. So I know Amazon is currently working on a particular thing where they are providing a personalized version of an enterprise knowledge base language model to an insurance company. So they can correlate all of their documents, they can converse with it in conversational language to find the key data and information that they need. So the future is very much, in my view, going to become more personalized versions of large language models. And there's a great opportunity there as well. If we are seriously thinking about the role of libraries as authorities that provide factually correct information, then we should start thinking about what kind of knowledge bases can we build around that, what kind of large language models we can build around that. It's not actually that difficult anymore. There are lots of those things available on Hugging Face and other platforms where you can just actually replicate some of these models for your personalized gains. Right, the digital gap. So you can only do that if you've got the digital skills. And the digital literacies and skills are very, very important. And let's start with library staff. Not very good. At least in my place, we don't have a lot of digital skills within the libraries. Our IT teams are being dispersed, usually taken out of the library. Sorry, Dale, I have to mention this, often because of uniform exercises and other things like that. Just bad decisions based on bad data in the first place. So I think there's a big issue about how do we develop that digital capability and digital skills within the library's workforce. We also need to start thinking about algorithmic literacies and XR literacies and other literacies. So we are about to hire a position particularly focusing on algorithmic literacy. So our students are mostly now familiar with ChatGPT. A lot of them are using it. We can keep pretending they're not, but they are. I think Mark mentioned yesterday about academic integrity and the links of AI with that. That's absolutely one place, but also lots of opportunities linked with that. Digital experimentation, I would, from a personal viewpoint, I've been victim of my own bias here, where if you need to do digital experimentation, it has to result in something. And when we go and talk about open research, we talk about null data outcomes, and that you should promote that. I realized I don't think that way in the library. I hope others do think that way. Digital experimentation should be about experimentation, not about outcomes. And I think we need to build more of that culture in our libraries. Digital inclusion and copyright. So even before this accessibility happens, in the UK, over 1 million people don't have any digital access. Over 1 million people don't do any online banking. Physical branches are almost gone. So where is inclusion for that? And especially with the world that we're moving in, where's inclusion going to be for them? So there's some big challenges on digital inclusion. And copyright I don't have to mention because there was a very, very good debate yesterday on that one. And digital creativity and cultures, and I'll come to this in 1 second, because a lot of us also have units which are looking at cultural offer and also galleries, museums, etc. So what do we do with that? This one is very close to my heart, the innovation gap. I think we need to start thinking about rebalancing trusted knowledge and actually the role of libraries in that. We are a bit shy of saying, well, we will give you authenticated trusted knowledge. We used to be very, very good at that. Then the information landscape happened, and now we've kind of taken a back step. I think we need to rebalance that. We need to build more ethical industry partnerships. There is no way we can do this on our own. I don't think we need to do this on our own. But what's really, really good is there are lots of values-driven, socially driven industries that are coming in this area. Let's build partnerships with them. We don't have to build with big tech. We can work with small tech in this area. Augmentation possibilities, I've already mentioned a few of those. I won't go into detail. Makerspaces, invention labs, I really want that to become a big concept in libraries, at least in the UK, within Leeds as well. We've got a makerspace. We are now thinking about invention labs, where people, ideas, interaction, digital outcomes are all coming together. And last but not least, we need to reclaim ownership of digital. It's not IT's business. I don't know how else to phrase this. Digital is all of our business, but it's been owned by the concept of it has very, very technical skills required behind it. Digital thinking is very different to IT infrastructures, and we really need to start building more ownership of digital in the library, because ultimately digital is also about human experiences. We know that better than anyone else. Right, so just quoting this on our responsibility. So all libraries provide support for filling one or two or more of these gaps. So I'm not telling you anything that you're not doing. But the challenge here is of urgency and scale. We didn't reach that urgency with the information age. We should have that sense of urgency for that imagination age. There's no point in saying, let's do this over the next 10 years. Let's do this over the next 5 years. We are going to always be chasing this. And in some ways, that's okay, but in other areas, that's not okay. And scale. There's no point in doing this just at Leeds or just at any other institution. This is a global challenge, and it really needs response globally. So what does that lead us to? So moving forward on AI ethically and inclusively is our collective responsibility, and to do this, we need to work at both organization and above organization level, nationally and globally. So the two key things I'll say is organization and above organization, and I'll give you one example of each. So with that in mind, we first said we can't preach this to others if we are not doing this on our own. So we started doing this with our vision at Leeds. So our vision, as I mentioned, is called Knowledge for All. There's a link in there. Please do explore it at any time you're interested in reading more about it. And what we did in there was we very much focused on a few points. And these are a few strategic priorities that I'm quoting here. And the keywords, I won't take you through all of this. You can read this. But the keywords I'm going to mention is data analytics and machine learning are right in this strategic priority. The next strategic priority is all about digital information, biases, poverty, ethics of technologies. We need to start opening up debates on that. If we don't talk about it, nobody else will. And last but not least, this one was one that I had to fight a little bit on, because technology for the sake of technology is not the right outcome. But if we are always fearful of them, we'll not embrace them. So this was about embracing and actively pursuing certain technologies to improve user experience, including linked data, AI, and extended reality in libraries. So these are just some of the strategic priorities from our vision. Mentioned that digital creativity and cultures was very important to us, so we've now established a hub, again within the library, in a very strong partnership with Leeds Arts and Humanities Research Institute. And the key reason there is about digital humanities and digital scholarship, so the intersection of digital and collections. But the reason for us doing that was not because someone was knocking on our door and saying we need to do more with digital humanities. It was because we wanted to develop a culture of innovation, where experimentation and learning are celebrated. So again, these are direct quotes from our vision at the moment. And that then led into the formation of the Digital Creativity and Cultures Hub. The thing I've skipped over is we've also started doing research officer positions in the library. So these are 6-month research officer positions. The first one, and they're all digital technology linked. The first one was on AI and libraries, the report of which will be released in 2 weeks' time. So I'll share that as soon as it's out. The next one is going to be on extended reality and libraries. The next one after that, we're thinking quantum at the moment to see what the information privacy situation might be with that. And that's our commitment to really advancing libraries' role in digital futures as well. Right. One other thing I really want to mention is Knowledge Equity Network. So this is an example of above organization, but actually above nation initiative, and something that Leeds been a pioneering partner in. So what Knowledge Equity Network is a recognition that we cannot solve global challenges. If you pick SDGs, you're picking quality education, reduction in poverty, strategic partnerships. We cannot do that if we keep competing with each other. We really need to start building common knowledge systems, that's actually not true. We need to respect knowledge systems rather than build common knowledge systems, and actually start working on initiatives that support knowledge equity. This initiative started with a thought process about 2 years ago, then led to a series of vice chancellors and presidents who were all saying they're sick and tired of these rankings in the background, but nonetheless can't say that out publicly. And then said, if you want to change the system, someone has to start it. And that's what Knowledge Equity Network is all about. It started as a consortium of about 18 institutions from across the globe. So places like University of Leeds, but also University of Auckland in New Zealand, Open University of Sudan, I think NTNU from Norway, et cetera, et cetera. Mahidol from Thailand, Tech Monterrey in Mexico. I should have remembered this list properly. But I think the key message there is that there was a consortium of organizations which came together and said, this is not right. So Plan S has signed this, Wikimedia UK Foundation has signed this, and it's basically highlighting that we want to start doing more open research, more open education, and more open infrastructures. And open infrastructures is the one that's really, really interesting in there. I mean, I was listening again yesterday to the conversations about open education and thinking, gosh, you're doing a lot more than where we are in the UK on that. So, but why do we have to do this on our own? And again, that's the whole point of knowledge equity. And the reason why I'm also mentioning this is where does the remit of knowledge equity falls within organizations? And that is the libraries. So at Leeds, the library is developing the blueprint of what the local implementation for this would look like. There's a declaration. You can sign as an individual. I would encourage you, if you're a true believer in the principles, do sign up. Or you can also push your organizations to sign up. The deputy vice chancellors, the vice chancellors are very happy to talk to each other. But this is a declaration that we need to change the system. The system is not right. And that goes not just from our end, that goes into reward and recognition. Tenure was mentioned yesterday. It goes into tenure. It goes into everything that currently makes the current system not right. Okay, moving on. I also want to give you a bit about what RLUK is doing in this area. So some of you might know we developed our strategy in 2022 for 2025. I'll just pick one quotation from that strategy, which is digital technologies continue to change society. How we relate to each other, how research is carried out, how we learn. Again, so relevant to the conversations that were happening yesterday about what's the link of AI in research, what's the link of AI in education. And we are reflecting these changes, we are expanding our roles, we are exploring these outcomes. I would personally want us to be even more bold, and I would say, let's do something about it. Exploration is a very nice word, but that's what we do. We keep exploring, and I think we really need to start shifting the dial more on that one. So based on that, in 2021, Digital Shift Manifesto was developed, and this manifesto was a declaration that we are going to commit to 4 areas in digital. Digital skills, digital scholarship, digital and physical spaces, and digital stakeholders. But the thing that I was really interested in is very early on in digital stakeholders, we said industry is our stakeholder. We were not shying from that. So I think that's really interesting, that where do we go next with that one? And we also developed a Digital Shift Forum. I'm hoping many of you have heard of that. If not, I will give you some description. So there are 2 programs that have run over the last 2 years. In first year, we had 15 sessions. In second year, we had 19 sessions. This map is from the very first session of the very first program, just to give you an idea of how many different parts of the world were interested in this particular topic on digital shift. And it covers topics of all range, from digital skills to digital poverty, to inclusivity, to artificial intelligence, to creativity, storytelling, digital dystopia. They're all available on demand, so you can just watch them freely if you want to. And then the last thing that we are actively focusing on is the workforce strategy. And within that, we are particularly looking at what our future, so there are 2 aspects to that. How do we scale our existing workforce, but also how do we attract new kinds of workforce into the libraries? And we are in the middle stage of this analysis at the moment. So the first one was understanding, the second one was undertaking, and the third one was delivering. So we are now currently looking at skills audits. We are looking at workforce segmentation in the libraries, how much of that workforce is digital in its nature, etc., to then develop a series of programs that enhance the capabilities of our existing workforce, but also provides toolkits and guidance on what kind of workforce can we attract, how do we diversify the pipelines for workforce, etc., etc. So we're hoping that that will then come out as a strong guideline for everyone else as well. And my very last slide, which I always talk about, I'm just very passionate about this, is I really believe in libraries as infrastructures. And there are lots of things in there. So we are definitely social infrastructures. A lot of people use our facilities. If you're public access, members of public use our facilities. Lots of friendships happen in libraries. When we did our last library survey, the population that found the library to be the most socially cohesive place was Black and Asian minority communities. So there's a big implications of libraries as social infrastructures. And is it Eric Kleinberg who's written a whole book on this as well? Knowledge infrastructures, very, very well aware of that, whether they are physical knowledge infrastructures or digital knowledge infrastructures, it's our business. It's the last one I really want us to take ownership of, which is innovation infrastructures. We are in that unique position that we support all faculties, we support all professional entities, we often work with public, we often work with cultural assets, we work with donors. We are almost a microcosm of the larger institution within a library. What better place to spark innovation? There is no better place where ideas, knowledge, people come together. So here's a plea in there, which is let's work together and let's start taking ownership of libraries as an innovation infrastructure. The second plea I have is let's do something on this together. I appreciate funding, but a lot of us have influence in different funding councils. I sit on AHRC Infrastructure Advisory Group. Let's not do things individually. I think these are global challenges. Let's start bringing communities, funding agencies together. Some of that is already happening. I think libraries are becoming more and more active players in that funding talks. So let's do that a bit more as well. And let's celebrate what we achieve together as well. That's all I had to say. Thank you very much. And I appreciate your patience.